But there is a great example about the power of conscience, and it's a saint. His name's St. Thomas More. And he's actually in our chapel, not his body, just a picture. Okay? And he's down there, and he's a martyr of conscience. That's what he's called, a martyr of conscience. And what happened with St. Thomas More is very interesting. So as I mentioned, sort of about signing the oath, that's his example. King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII. Anyone heard of him? A few? All right, so King Henry VIII, he was having trouble producing a male offspring. This is a big problem here at King, right? A big problem. And his wife, Catherine, kept having stillborns and could not produce an heir. And so King Henry wanted to divorce his wife and marry Anne Boleyn. Okay? And since England was a Catholic country, there was no divorce. Just as Jesus says, there's no divorce. And King Henry got his Lord Chancellor and he said, go to the Pope and ask him if I can get this marriage dispensed with. Then I can marry this other woman named Anne and we can have an heir. And everything will be fine in England. Right? But the Pope refused. He said, no divorce. And Jesus said, there's no divorce. There's no divorce. And then King Henry's pretty upset about that. That Lord Chancellor dies, and then Thomas More takes his place as Lord Chancellor. And Thomas More realizes that King Henry is, well, he's kind of crazy, first of all. He's actually kind of crazy. But King Henry made himself then the head of the church in England. Because if you're head of the church in England, then you can just dissolve your own marriage and then marry someone else. Right? That was his idea. Right? And Thomas More would not go along with this. He would not sign the oath. All of his friends were like, come on, just sign the oath. Like, you're a lawyer. This is what lawyers do. We just, we lie. That's what the movie's about. Anyone seen the movie A Man for All Seasons? You've seen it, Sophie? Okay, what'd you think?
It's good.
Yeah, it's Bishop Barron's favorite movie. He watches it once a year, so he's really bored. So Thomas More won't sign the oath, and his friend is telling him, just sign the oath for the sake of fellowship. Because we don't really believe it, but we're just doing it because it'll make life easier. And Thomas More just refuses to sign the oath. And he tells his friend, like, well, if I do this, I violate my conscience, and I go to hell. That's what happens if I sign this oath. And then he tells his friend, like, look, if you sign the oath, and that's what your conscience tells you to do, and I don't sign the oath, because that's what my conscience tells me to do, so I'm not going to sign it. Sorry, but the line is, Thomas More says, if I sign the oath and I go to hell, will you go to hell with me for the sake of fellowship? Yeah, it's like the best line ever in a movie. It's so awesome, and the whole script is just amazing. Right? But that's the power of conscience. So what happens to Thomas More? His conscience tells him, I can't sign this because this is absolutely ridiculous that the king would make himself the head of the church. Jesus told Peter and the apostles they were going to be the head of the church. Thomas More gets removed, and then they eventually get him on high treason. They basically they kill him. They behead him. Right? So he goes to his death, even though to avoid his death, all he had to do was just sign. Right? Because his conscience was so, his window was so clear. His conscience was just so well formed that he knew he could see out into reality and say, if I sign that oath, I am damned. Right? That's the power of it. Like, that's the power of your conscience. Right? Yeah.
Can it be forgiven?
Oh yeah, it could be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be. No, it could be.
Okay.
Yeah. But to, yeah, that's what his daughter told him, actually. You're right. So this gets into really intricate moral questions. But his daughter told him, don't just sign the oath because you're a valuable person, we want you around. And he made a judgment that in the situation, things were going so bad morally that somebody had to step up and be a martyr, or it would just perpetually get worse. So yeah, he could have been forgiven, but if he knows that he kind of knew in this situation, his judgment was that I have to die for this. Because, well, that's what his conscience told him. So, and he went with it. He died. So, yeah, Ben?
I mean, I think it's the whole concept that it's following your own conscience. So his daughter didn't, I mean, probably, like, only one person was saying people could follow their conscience and sign the oath and not be damned, but for him particularly, it was this individual case. That's why he's a martyr for conscience, because his conscience was the only conscience where, yes, that is it.
Yep.
So it's like that's what it really through.
Exactly. That's what he tells his friend. He's like, look, you could sign it, go to paradise.
Yeah.
I could sign it and go to hell.
Which is kind of sucks, but.
Hey, heaven's really, really good. Just saying. Really good. Life on earth. Kind of crappy. Like that's what Christians believe. I mean, this is the valley of tears. Like, I want my windows super clean so that I can die for Jesus. Like, yeah, that would be the case. I mean, that's what St. Paul and all the saints have told us, right? That heaven is worth it, and you get great movies out of stories like that. Great movies. Yeah.
Isn't violating your conscience like what every sin is? I mean, people know what's right and wrong and they still do it. Anyway, it happens all the time.
Except in this case, this would be a sin. To be culpably ignorant, right, is a sin, but you're following your conscience. Okay, you're just, your conscience is not well formed, and you're at fault for that. So I'll read. So how do you end up in this culpable ignorance? This ignorance can often be imputed to personal responsibility. This is the case when a man takes little trouble to find out what is good, right? You don't show up to class because you're out doing something else, right? Or when conscience is by degrees almost blinded through the habit of committing sin. Right? You commit lots and lots of sins, what do you end up with? Starts with a V. Vice. Vice. Now vice is like lots of dirt on the window. Totally obscure, right? By degrees, the conscience is blinded by the habit of committing sin. In such cases, the person is culpable for the evil he commits, even though his conscience told him it was wrong. Ignorance of Christ, bad example given by others, enslavement to one's passions, assertion of a mistaken notion of autonomy of conscience, rejecting the church's authority in her teaching, lack of conversion and charity. These are the sources of error. Okay. So, if you want to know more, great book, Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, On Conscience. On Conscience. Okay, it really goes into it, and it's really, really, really beautiful. And it really gives you a sense of how natural law and conscience really bridges the gaps between like all religions, all peoples, because it gets to our creation. think it's just the level of our creation and this original memory of what's good that we all have. Okay? And that's why salvation is not limited to those who are Christian. Right? If you follow your conscience and you're not hopefully ignorant, right? You can do what is good. You can be saved. Okay, Thomas More, awesome saint. Now, here we go. We got to form our conscience, right? How do we do that? We got to clean the window. How do you form your conscience? All right, there's many ways, but one of the ways is to acquire virtues. Right? Education is one of the ways to form your conscience, to be educated, right? To be taught. Right? This is a very, very important part of forming our conscience. Right? And we need to form virtues. We need to be educated in the virtues. Right? The virtues. The virtue is the power to do good. Power to do good with joy and ease. All right? If you are, golfing and you find it quite difficult to make a 3-foot putt, right? But you happen to make it, right? That's a good act. It's just not a virtuous act, right? Because you didn't do it with ease, right? Or if you find the good possible, if you can do something good, but you don't enjoy it, right? You kind of just will it, you kind of white knuckle it. That's also not virtue. And virtue is this power to enjoy, to do the good with ease. Like a professional golfer, right? The way he hits the ball with putts, right? It's just like it's absolute ease. That's because they've acquired a virtue over millions and millions of golf swings. They take millions of swings. It's crazy. Right? Now, the virtue most closely related to conscience is prudence. Okay, the cardinal virtues. And then we're going to talk about, we're probably just going to talk about prudence, that's it. But, right, prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. All right, who came up with these? No one really knows. Right, these go way back. Plato even says, like, we just take these for granted. Like, everyone seems to come to this conclusion that these are the 4 virtues that perfect human nature. Like, no one came, like, again, they're kind of powers almost written into our nature. And this is what perfects us. To be prudent, to be just, to be courageous, and to be temperate. And it was kind of the Greeks that first started like writing about it and all that, just reflecting on it. Okay, but prudence is closely related to conscience. So we're going to talk about prudence tonight, and that's probably it. We might touch on the others. Okay, but prudence is the habit of good decision making. Okay, the habit of good decision making. Okay, the knack kind of. I like that word, knack. To doing the right thing, right? The power to make good decisions, right? To be responsible, right? What should you do when you graduate from college? I don't know, right? Okay, but that's the type of decisions that the prudent person would make with wisdom. Now, prudence deliberates. The first is, prudence is not concerned with our end. Not ends, but means. Okay? Right? Prudence chooses the means, the proper means to reach our end. Right? But our end is given to us. Right? What's our end? What's our goal? Heaven. No. Heaven. And prudence is deciding what is going to get me to heaven. What are the means, right, to get me there? And the process of decision making is kind of broken down into 3 stages. Deliberation, judgment, and decision. All right. Now, the way I like to talk about virtues, and I think the most helpful, is to talk about the errors. All right. It's almost easier to talk about being imprudent and then figuring out what being prudent is from the wrong thing. Right? You learn a lot from your mistakes, right? A lot. Okay. So, these are some of the errors of prudence. Okay. When you fail to deliberate, right, you are thoughtless. You are rash. You just do something. Right? You don't even think about it. Okay, that's called thoughtlessness. If you fail to, if you fail to make the proper judgment, I think that would be related to conscience. So it would be like an erroneous conscience. Right? It would be the error of I guess false judgment. All right. If you fail to make decisions, this is indecision or irresoluteness. You always hesitate. You never make a decision. Always just stuck. Right? Right? That's a sin against prudence. Right? We think of prudence as like being careful and like being prude, right? Not doing anything. I don't even know what prude. Prude is like this word that I like heard in high school a few times, and like I haven't heard it since. So I have no idea how people use this word, but it's like you're prude if you don't commit sins against chastity or something. I guess that was what it meant in high school for me. But anyway, words are used differently by different people. But anyways, prudence is not timidity. It's not being careful. No, it's the habit of making the right decision. And if you never make a decision, if you always hesitate, that's an error in prudence. Another way to err, that's kind of like lack of deliberation, lack of judgment, lack of decision. Another way to err in prudence is, it's called cunning. All right, and this is what the devil is. The devil is cunning. Because in a sense, the devil has like intellectual virtue, right? He's very, very smart. His ability to do these two, actually really to do all three, to deliberate and to judge, at least to deliberate, is very good because he has an angelic intellect. Right? But cunning is kind of like using the wrong means. Right? It's being sly. It's being just wicked, and that's a sin against prudence. So these are some of the errors against prudence. But The positive is a little harder to describe. It's just being good at deliberating, judging, making decisions, right? And I think, honestly, the ability to think on your feet and make quick decisions that are correct, that's prudence to me. Like, just if you know a person who's just kind of like with it, and like can on the fly, like kind of be a leader, right? Make the right decision at the right time. Like, I think a good coach has to be prudent. That's how I would describe prudence positively. Okay. Now we're going to run through the, just going to define the other three, and that's all we're going to have time for tonight. Okay? Justice is the constant and firm will to give God and neighbor what is their due. All right? So, and justice towards God has a special name, and it's called religion. All right? So this is just to say religion is a virtue. Religion is a virtue. It's giving God what is due to God. Okay? And the church, as I mentioned last time, the church sort of lays that out in the precepts of the church. Right? To spend some time in prayer, to go to Mass on Sunday, right? To receive Holy Communion once a year, to confess your sins once a year. Right? These practices of piety are all part of the virtue of religion, which is underneath justice. All right, fortitude is the power to do the difficult good. Right, it regulates fear. Right, so it regulates fear. Temperance regulates pleasure. Right, fear. If you have no fear at all, absolutely no fear at all, you're reckless, right? And that's an error. But if you have so much fear, right, you're a coward, and that is also an error, or even a sin against the virtue of fortitude. And I always like to think of Jesus being neither reckless nor a coward, right? Especially as he goes to his death. Right? He doesn't like say, "Hey, here I am, like, kill me now," right? He doesn't like throw himself into his death recklessly, but neither is he afraid to sort of like calmly go to his death. So Jesus is obviously the perfect example of all virtue. And then temperance is the virtue which moderates pleasure. It moderates pleasure. We're going to go over that a bit more when we cover sexual morality and chastity. But it also has a lot of other things as well. It governs any pleasure associated with anything, which could be sleep, food, knowledge. And, pleasure is a good, but it's not the ultimate good. Right? It should accompany our good acts. But it is not a good in itself. Right? So it has to be moderated, so it doesn't take first place. Okay? The last thing to go over is the relationship between virtue and grace, but we're going to leave it at that tonight and go over that next time. I can probably take one or two questions and we'll wrap up with one announcement. All right, very good, very good. It's getting late. Thank you for, again, coming to class and for doing all that you do. You're going to have a little bit of a break now. No class next week. On the 24th, we're going to have the first scrutiny. And I'm going to have to send some directions about that, probably just through email, because I didn't get time to kind of prepare anything tonight. That's a couple weeks away yet. So that's again on March 24th at 7:45 p.m. We'll have class, and then we'll have Mass afterwards with the first scrutiny. Okay, so if you can come with your sponsor, that would be very, very good. And you will have a small role to play in the Mass. So if you like crowds, and there'll be like 50 people there. This will be the 9 p.m. Mass after spring break, so it won't be a big crowd. But it'll be important that it's a public event, kind of like what you did today, but on a smaller scale, and just kind of declaring before the church your intention to receive sacraments. Okay? I think that is it. So why don't we just pray a Hail Mary? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Hail Mary,
Full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
All right, if you haven't gone on a retreat, there is the grad student retreat and the women's side of the retreat coming.